Hello and welcome to the Now Spinning Magazine podcast with me, Phil Aston. And on this episode, I'm delighted to welcome one of the true unsung heroes of classic rock or rock music in general, really, and that is engineer Richard Digby Smith. His career spans decades from the golden age of the early 70s on island studios with bands like Free Traffic, Bob Marley, right through to his incredible recent work with Black Sabbath and even more recently, Deep Purple's 50th anniversary of Main in Japan. We're going to look back at some of those classic sessions, and this is an original cover of a book that's been out for a while called One, Two, Three, Four. It's the look at the life and times of the recording engineer. Now, this has been reissued as an ebook, and there's also a new version with a brand new cover, isn't there, Richard?
Yes, there is. Published by Noble Legacy Publishing. Thank you, Phil.
But it's an absolutely fascinating read. And I'm originally from Birmingham, as are you, Richard, aren't you? One of the things
Absolutely. Which part of
I'm from Solihull, kind of South Birminghamish. I think it was known as the posh bit back in the day, but it wasn't really that
it
posh.
was the part? No, no. I think there was a lot of resentment in Solihull when they were
Yeah,
given a Birmingham postcode, I seem to
yeah,
recall.
that's right. Now
Uh,
you left home at the age of 19 to go to London to get involved with the music business, and I think that is such. I can't imagine many 19-year-olds now doing anything as adventurous as that. I mean, it was a huge step into the unknown for you, um, but you managed to find your feet very quickly, didn't you, in getting work at Island?
I went to London because there were very few recording facilities
In
in the
Birmingham.
Birmingham Midlands area. So I got a London telephone directory on my lunch break and wrote down uh, the names and addresses and phone numbers of, I think it was a total of 38 recording studios in London.
Yeah,
And armed with this list of 38, I checked into the YMCA in Great Russell Street in London, near Tottenham Court Road, and spent 3 or 4 days pavement pounding
the
the
pavement.
streets of
Yeah.
London. I got to know London so well. And the last one on the list, he couldn't offer me a job, but he kindly mentioned that Island Records were building a studio over by Portobello Road. So late on that October evening, on a Thursday evening,
Yeah.
I made my way over to Basing Street and introduced myself to Island Records.
Wow. Um, was it people I think have this atmosphere that in the early 70s it was this free flowing kind of, full of very young people in the music business. Was it more structured than people think? I mean, was it like
Not not so at Ireland, Phil. Uh, Under the auspices of the owner of the label, Chris Blackwell, he was very of a mind to encourage young scallywags like me to get in the studio as quickly as possible and put us in with young musicians like the guys from Free.
yeah,
They were all sort of 19, 20 years of age, similar age. I had a lot of their records back home in Birmingham. I mean, I went from being a punter uh, in the October of 1969, and in January of 1970, I became a professional. I sometimes liken it, Phil, to my life in Birmingham in and up to the end of 1969, if I can be forgiven for making a football analogy. Uh,
go for it.
my life in Birmingham was playing for my local Sunday factory team in a non-league environment, to then in January of 1970 finding myself playing for Liverpool up front with Mo Salah. And it happened. It happened that quickly. I just got thrust into what could only be described as the big time, almost overnight.
Amazing, because one of the stories in here is that, to take everyone back who's listening and watching to this, is that when you edited stuff, it was literally cutting and slicing tape, wasn't it? I mean, it was, and in sticking it together, it was nothing like today where you're using, Pro Tools or whatever. So there was one particular story. Is it Stephen Stills when you actually, the tape started to unravel and shred?
Yes, that's absolutely right. It was in the days when I started working in the business in 1970. 8-track recording was pretty much the norm, although Island Studios was one of the first to have a 16-track 2-inch tape machine. So I cut my teeth on the 16-track stuff, and some of the early free stuff was still on 8-track. But having had a little tape recorder and a microphone in my bedroom back in Birmingham, I used to using a pair of scissors and some sellotape to stick bits of tape together. So now I'm in a professional recording studio, and you've got a proper editing block with proper razor blades and tape.
Yeah.
And it was there was no such thing as non-destructive editing. There was no copy and paste. It was hands-on and pretty scary. And the incident you refer to there, I wasn't on that particular session, but Stephen Stills, who was on Atlantic Records at the time, was one of the first major outside projects to come to Island's Basing Street studios. And Stephen Stills and his entourage recorded Stephen's first solo album at Basing Street. And the incident in question was a night when one of his master recordings was loaded onto the tape machine, and the rewind button was hit, and of course those huge 2-inch reels of tape would be whizzing through the tape guides and the spindles and past the recording and playback head at an alarming speed. And if you hadn't done the edit particularly accurately, which was the case with this particular reel of tape, where the master recordings had been spliced together, it caught a snag on the edge of the tape, and by the time the tape had stopped rewinding, the 2-inch tape had a tear all the way to about halfway down the tape. It was a disaster.
Amazing and so scary. I mean, you're 20 when you work on this album, aren't you? You literally, if I've got that right, this is 1970. This is Fire and Water by Free, one of their classic albums.
That was released just as I arrived at the studio, and I think that was so that had already previously been recorded. I think a lot of it was recorded at Morgan Studios with Andy Johns, I think, was the engineer. So the first record I got to work with those guys was as an assistant engineer on the next album, which I think was called Highway.
Yeah. And
so I was assistant.
You were assistant on there, and you worked then on Free at Last.
Yes, that was again Chris Blackwell. It was all about chemistry as far as Chris was concerned. He realised that there seemed to be this affinity between me and the guys in the band. As I say, we were all about the same age, and we had similar levels of stamina and enthusiasm, and so Chris gave me the keys to the Studio 2 initially at Basing Street, and let me loose with these guys. And that was one of my first professional albums that I recorded as a full-on first engineer.
I mean, they were young kids like you were, Richard, but they were very mature in the kind of lyrical themes that they chose. But they're young kids with lots of big egos and all trying to fit in and find their own place and everything. I mean, did you find them? Were they easy to work with? Were there kind of lots of I want my bit in there and I could do that better? I mean,
That is the case, Phil. Every time you set foot in a studio anywhere, that
yeah,
is always the case. In terms of specifics, the recording of that album was relatively peaceful, and you got a job to do. You've got a dozen songs to record, and there isn't really too much time for egos and stuff. It was a lot. I'd have to say the situation was a lot more. How can I say passionate and a lot more um, fragile when we came to do their Swan Song album, Heartbreaker. That was a lot more. That was a lot more emotionally charged. Yeah, that and I think when you listen, so Free at Last was pretty plain sailing. It was we all knew what we were doing, and they're such great musicians, and so people often say how great those records sound, but then they sounded great. You could have recorded that album using a couple of cassette machines, and it still would have sounded great because that's how good they were. On the Heartbreaker album, I think there was a lot more pressure to come up with another hit in the following in the shoes of All Right Now, which although we had a couple of records that charted with
little bit of
a little
love.
bit of love,
My brother Jake.
yeah, yes, that was a reasonably successful record. Off the Breaker album, we had Wishing Well, which you still hear occasionally on the radio.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
uh,
Because Paul Rodgers, the other thing, and you obviously there at in amongst all of this, is the amount of alternative vocal takes that Paul did, and obviously you worked extensively on this box set, and anyone
okay.
who's bought this box set, the Songs of Yesterday, which is absolutely packed full of songs, but none of them are from our album versions. They're all alternative versions. So it also says that because a lot of bands don't have this kind of stuff in their archive. So was it like, we'll do another take and we'll keep that one? We'll do another take and we'll keep that one as well?
With Free, you'd find that they would do surprisingly few takes, maybe one or two,
Oh, right.
three,
Okay.
perhaps. Or would, yeah. So some of the earlier takes that didn't make it onto the album would have had guide vocals on them and possibly a couple of basic guitar overdubs. But then if the track was re-recorded, and that would be the version that would feature on the album. So yeah, there would have been studio outtakes that would have made it onto the Songs of Yesterday record, which I believe with Dave Clayton. He was
Yes,
a
that's
great
right. Yeah.
free. Dave was heavily involved in that. He went through all the tape archives, and
You
I
found them
think
all.
along with Trevor White at Island, they managed to dig out all these alternative versions. With Paul, particularly on the vocals, gosh, so many times you you could you could have easily used what we would have called the guide vocal, which would just, as the name suggests, would be a vocal take. You'd stick Paul in a side room somewhere, so his vocal didn't spill onto the
Yeah, yeah,
drums or the guitar. And Paul would just do a scratch vocal just for purposes of navigating everybody through the song's arrangement. And
yeah.
then when you were happy that you got the definitive take, Paul would go out and invariably deliver exceptional vocal performances in one or two takes. You know, it was always you so often had to pinch yourself and remind yourself that you were at work to hear and to see Paul Rodgers in the studio performing a lead vocal take. In his mind, you could tell he always liked a Shure 57 microphone, which is or a 58 stage mic, because he would like to hold the mic and the boom stand. And to all intents and purposes, in Paul's head, he was on stage, you know, in Sunderland or you know, at the Marquee or something. So he would always just put his heart and soul into it. Same with Kossoff when he put a lead guitar on. You know, it would be just heavenly, a joy to watch. And as I say, Phil, sometimes you'd have to just remind yourself and just check that you had put the machine in record and that you weren't getting too carried away. Yeah.
One of the things that I always felt that I noticed with Paul Rodgers especially is that once he got to the other side of the last chorus, he would ad-lib towards the fade, and it was almost as if he I was very lucky to talk to Simon Kirk about this, and he hadn't actually noticed it. But I've always felt that with all of Paul Rodgers' vocal performances, once he heads towards the fade, he seems to let go of the rail and any inhibitions, and would just whatever came into his heart or his head, he would just sing it. And that's why I noticed in a lot of the alternative takes, they're never the same. So it always came across that he sang how he felt at the time. Was he a very emotional person like that? However, the mood he was in would reflect how he performed?
Certainly, it was heart and soul with Paul, and often on sessions, Phil, when you're working with vocalists and perhaps you've got the definitive final vocal take, and then you'll suggest to the lead singer, perhaps we could just interweave with a few ad libs, just a few yeahs and a whoa and grab one of the lines of the lyrics and improvise. And sadly, so many vocalists just can't seem to explore that world of ad libbing and just
Interesting.
singing off the cuff like that and just kind of making it up as you go along. If you'd have stopped the tape and asked Paul what was the next note he was going to sing, he wouldn't know, because it would just flow so freely. And sometimes you might have an alternative vocal take, but there was one really mega ad lib line at the end that you might just feed that one in just for one line or something like that. You know, but for the most part, with Paul, and when you're in the studio with bands of that caliber who can play so well, it's invariably the ad libs are part of the vocal performance. It's not just a vocal take. It's not just a process of put track and record, getting a headphone level, a vocal level, and then going through the motions of verse, chorus, middle eight. With somebody like Paul, it's you just put the song on from the start, hit record, and just hold on to the desk and go for the ride.
They were such an emotional bunch of kids, really. I mean, they all came. Everything they did was from the heart, and I think Rodgers was into soul and stuff. And I mean, if you look now at Paul Kossoff, he also played very much emotionally from the heart. I mean, on the Heartbreaker album, the "Come Together in the Morning" guitar solo actually sounds like the guitar's actually crying.
You've singled out one of my all-time favorite tracks, not just of Free, but just generally one of my all-time favorite tracks. And I think Kossoff really enjoyed the freedom that came because you've got keyboards on that album, haven't
Yeah.
we? We've got Rabbit keyboards and stuff. So having somebody else to occupy the sort of middle ground of the musical frequencies with Rabbit's Hammond organ and piano,
Yeah.
it gave Koss a lot more space to, and Kossoff he always insisted, Phil, on putting he always put his lead guitar on would be the last overdub. He would always want to play guitar once the vocal was recorded, once Rabbit had put all his keyboards on. Then Kossi could stand back and he knew the spaces he was going to occupy. And he always wanted to weave in and out of the vocals and the keyboards. And the solo on Come Together and I'll tell you a quick anecdote about that. I believe it's that track where there's the opening note of the solo, which is just a beautifully held single sustained note. And then there's an almighty click.
Yes.
What it was Kossi's shirt sleeve, as he moved his hand down, it caught the pickup switch, and it made this, and his amp was turned up so high that just the smallest sound of a pickup switch being clicked, it exploded out of the amplifier. When we were doing the final mix down of that track, every time it came to that, if you like, accident with the click, with the funk, we tried to. Now you've got no computerization, you've got no audio, all seat of the pants stuff. When the engineers when you were doing the mix, that was the engineer's opportunity to perform on, if you like, his musical instrument, which for me was the desk.
Yes.
So now I know where all the backing vocals are. I know where all the nice little bits to lift and when little bits to duck down and when to lift Paul's vocals. So I'm playing the desk like an instrument. And every time it came to that bit of the guitar solo, we tried to duck the click outs to hide it. And we just kept missing it. So we had to go back to the start, do the mix again, and hope that when you got. So at one point, I just turned to the guys. I said, listen, I'm going to do one more mix, and I'm and I'm going to do something different this time. So the mix is going along. By now, I know exactly what you have all little marks on the fade. You're going to be lifting things and dropping things. And it's like my brain, my computer is programmed to do this mix. And I get to the part where there's that clunk on the guitar. And rather than try and duck it, I lifted it and threw a bit of reverb on it.
Yeah.
And then to the end and finished the mix. And all the guys in the band, everybody was really pleased with it, because instead of trying to disguise it as a mistake, essentially sort of left it there and highlighted it as it's, you know what, it's part of the performance. It's what happened. It's a moment in time that is captured. And when I listen, I occasionally listen to that track and indulge myself when it comes to that part of the song. I'm just I just think it's an epic moment in recording.
I think it's beautiful. I think it is one of my favorite songs of all time, and I think it's one of my favorite performances by Paul Kossoff. It just sounds, as I said, it's like the notes are like water just coming down a water. It sounds like tears. He sounds so emotional. And you saying, Richard, that he would wait until everything else was done. I always thought that was the case, because when you listen to his little inflections in Be My Friend, you can tell he's reacting to Paul's voice. He's bouncing off Paul's ad-libs at the end. It's an amazing, almost telepathic feeling between these young kids, isn't it, playing this music?
It shows a maturity that's beyond its years, isn't it, really? And at the time of the Heartbreaker album, I think probably, I mean, people talk about Kossoff and his drug problem and everything. I mean, I spent a lot of time in the studio with those guys, and particularly with Kossoff, and later on when he had his band Backstreet Crawler and the Kossoff Kirk Tetsu Rabbit album we did. So I got to know
Yeah.
Paul really well. He was a really lovely guy. You got them all there, Phil,
Yeah.
I see. And you know what? All the endless hours, timeless hours that I spent in the studio with Paul. Yeah, he was a bit out of it sometimes, but but usually none of us would be too far away from a swig of Jack Daniels or something, or a
Yeah.
little puff on a pipe or something. But I never, apart from perhaps in Los Angeles on the last day of recording the second Backstreet Crawler album. The last time I was in the
Yeah.
studio, that was the last time Paul was ever in the studio, was working on that record. The last night, doing all that was left was 3 or 4 guitar overdubs, and we had to get it done because.
So on this one, Second Street, Richard, because of
Yes.
it was, I guess a lot of the solos were just done in one take. It was just playing over the top of the songs that were already recorded and just on to the next one. Would that be a fair assumption, really?
Pretty much, and the Paul's fingering wasn't as deft as you would have liked. We worked on till about 4 or 5 in the morning, getting the last guitar overdubs done. And
Yeah.
I can remember coming out of the control room and sitting at the piano, Paul there with his headphones on, and I'm sitting at the piano bashing out the chords, shouting across to Paul, "This is where the chord change is." And so in the final moments there, that last night or two in the studio, Paul wasn't at his best, it has to be said. And we got the last bit of guitar done and put the tapes away and packed up the session, and everybody made their way home.
And that
And
was
that was
that.
the last chords, the last notes, and everything.
Yeah.
But on the Heartbreaker album, and I can visualize the night when he recorded, for example, the solo on "Come Together." Yeah, he might have been a bit dreamy. He might have been a bit in a bit of a whirl, but you know, not. Not in a state of disrepair. So I always say that, yeah, Cossi, he liked to. He had a penchant for downers,
Yeah.
Mandy's. That was
Yeah.
that was more his downfall. But he was never at the point, Phil, where he couldn't stand or he couldn't
Yeah.
play, or that he was sloppy or something, until unfortunately at the very end when we recorded Second Street.
Yeah. Another thing I really like in this book is you mention "Since I've Been Loving You" by Led Zeppelin as being like a perfect example of Led Zeppelin at their best, and the recording. And you also mention, of course, something that is well known in folklore, the squeaky bass drum from John Bonham. And in the book, you kind of suggest that it was there on purpose to actually give a feeling of authenticity, that you're in the presence of a real band in a real studio.
There are a couple of different versions of "Since I've Been Loving You." Somewhere it seems mysteriously the squeaky bass drum pedal has been somehow eradicated. I've
Right.
seen obviously some involvement of early AI in that regard, but on the original version and the version that I worked on with Andy Johns as the main engineer, it must be said. Yes, I'm convinced, and I mentioned this in the book, that whereas I think Jimmy might have commented, was there any way we could
Get rid of
that squeaky, noisy bass drum? But I think Andy, mischievously, as was his
Pushed it
nature,
up.
probably did everything he could to enhance it and make it. Because when you listen to that track, and if once you're made aware of the squeaky bass drum,
You can't not hear it.
it's almost deafening. but it's wonderful because you can put no finer point on it, but you can visualize John Bonham's foot, and that it puts you right in the moment, doesn't it?
It does. It does indeed. Now you're working with like bands like that, and then in 1974, you're introduced to this band, Sparks, which no one else sounded like this band. No one else sounds like this band now. I mean, what was that like being in being so? Come along, Richard. Listen to this band we found. I mean,
Well, the way it worked at Basing Street, by the time we were working on with bands like Sparks, you got to remember now that this is Island Records. We've had hits with Free. You've got Cat Stevens.
yeah,
You got Mott the Who doing rather well.
John
Fairport
Martin, yeah,
Convention.
yeah,
John Martin, Jimmy Cliff. So as one of about four or five staff engineers at the label. We were so busy, Phil. You might find yourself working on 2 or 3 albums at the same time. So you turn up for work to the studio on a Monday morning and go see Penny, or later it would be Sally, Penny Hanson or Sally Whiteman, who were running the studio, and you'd look at the board on the wall in the studio office, and it'd have the week's rota,
yeah,
and you'd
yeah,
see that you were working with convention, or you had an orchestral session in the morning, then you'd be in the studio with Free from 5 p.m. onwards all through the
yeah,
night.
yeah,
And every Monday morning, Muff Winwood, who was the senior A&R
yeah. Of
director
course.
at Island Records at that time, he always penciled in 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. as he always locked the studio out, Studio 2 usually, as a chance for him to audition firsthand one of the artists or bands that had sent in the
Yeah,
many
yeah,
dozens and dozens of tapes that would be sent to the record label. One such success story was the Sutherland Brothers and Quiver.
Quiver.
They
Yeah,
sent a
yeah,
little
yeah.
demo.
Great band. Yeah,
There was myself and another engineer at the time, Tony Platt. We were pretty much in those days was worked. We were Muff's go-to engineers. So if I was available, I'd work with Muff. If I wasn't available, then Tony would, or the other way round. So I'd done quite a few sessions with Muff, and that was one of the comforts of working for Ireland. You had Muff Winwood, who was a fellow Brummie. The chief engineer at the time was a chap called Brian Humphreys, who'd had much success with Pink Floyd and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Kinks and all kinds of that. Brian was a fellow Brummie, and I did eventually forgive him for being a West Brom supporter, but putting that to one side. So there was and with the band Traffic,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
there was quite a big Birmingham connection
yeah.
with
There was, wasn't there? Yeah,
so so that made me feel quite at home, to say the least. So as one of Muff's go-to engineers,
yeah.
um, I was booked in to work with Muff on a rare occasion that we didn't actually record at Basing Street. Muff said, "I've got a new band that
Mm-hmm.
we signed to the label. We're going to Ramport Studios, which I think belonged to the
The
Who
Who. Yeah,
at
yeah,
the time. I think it was out in Battersea, unless I'm mistaken. But anyway, so I went on. This was, I think, the one only time I ever worked with Muff, other than at Basing Street. We went to Ramport, and in walked these guys. And first impressions, Phil, how how well dressed and coiffured everybody
yes,
was.
yes. But yeah, very true.
And there's me and Muff. There's me and Muff in jeans and t-shirts, and we think, well, we're going to have to up our sartorial game here, aren't we? So we did start turning up in nice shirts and polished shoes and things. But I was under the impression this was just another one of Muff's bands, and obviously any any session with Muff, you always knew.
Yes. So the other point I want to make here, Richard, is that you're still in you're in your mid-20s, aren't you? When this is happening, you're still a really young
23,
guy. 23.
23, and working with Muff Winwood, and
Yeah.
and his little brother Steve, and it's just like, have I actually died and gone to heaven? I must have done, because why else would this be happening? It was just like I say, it was like playing. I'm there playing for Liverpool up front with Mo Salah. It was such was the change in my life. But I was I was under the impression that this band Sparks, that they'd been together in that form for some time. It was, without being too unkind, but it was just another band with Muff producing,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so you've got no idea, Phil, at the time when you're recording this music, and here you go again, you go through the motions as you would do with any other band, whether it be Free or Joe Bloggs. You get everybody's headphones satisfactory, and they routine the song. I particularly remember This Town Ain't Big Enough. I'm thinking, gosh, this is a complicated song, but they'd obviously been well rehearsed. I mean, generally speaking, their songs they're not the usual 3 or 4 chord,
Yeah.
12-bar rock and roll, is it? So,
No, gosh, no, not at all.
So, fantastic track, and it couldn't have been produced better than with somebody like Muff, who was very methodical. So, it was great to work with Muff. Very methodical, very systematic, and it was actually Muff reminded me many years ago now, but after this recording, that it had been my idea to put the gunshots on This Town Ain't Big Enough, and then I racked my brains, and I remembered it then in time from when I wrote the book. Everybody was about to break for lunch. I was having a conversation with Muff and Ron and Russell about the song This Town. So there's something about the high noon. There's something about a shootout at the,
Yeah.
at the old corral, or something. I thought, thinking of High Noon and movies like that.
Yeah, of course.
And I think it sort of tweaked Ron and Russell's imagination, and we thought, as was often the case in recording studios those days, there'd be some vinyl on the shelf behind you, and invariably there might be some orchestral records or some jazz albums or some old 78s or whatever. And there was an album in the control room of sound effects, like double bass.
Yeah. Dogs barking. Yeah.
Sounds of the orchestra, and there was also one of the tracks on this sound effects albums with 2 or 3 gunshots. So whilst everybody went off for lunch, I sampled onto a separate piece of tape a bunch of gunshot sounds, and then I ran the multi-track and flew the gunshot sounds in at random at various points of the song, wherever it just deemed fit. And when the guys all came back from lunch, I played it to them, and everybody just fell about and thought it was hysterical, and it was really appropriate. So it stayed on the record.
That's a brilliant story. Thank you for sharing that. I was thinking that you were working on so many projects, you wouldn't know. Thinking now, fast forward several decades, which bands were going to become really well known and which ones, well, they were just kind of projects. I'm thinking there was Rough Diamond, a band that had lots of potential, but it never really took off for them.
Yes.
And the other one is Detective, the one you worked on with
Oh
Michael
my gosh.
DeVar. Do you remember that one?
I do indeed. I remember traipsing around I kid you not, every single recording studio in Los Angeles with the drummer. Remind me, I know his name.
Michael. No, it wasn't Michael Monarch. It was
Michael
that was a
DeBar was
guitarist. It was John Hyde.
Michael DeBar,
John Hyde.
John Hyde, and going around with John auditioning. We wanted. He knew exactly what sort of drum sound he wanted. He wanted a big room, a big drum sound, a sort of John Bonham-esque type of drum sound.
Which you get.
I forget where. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. There was that one, and then you also worked on Sammy Hager's All Night Long.
Oh yes, which was called. That was his Red album, I think.
Yeah, Red album. Yeah, it was called Loud and Clear about 2 years after this, wasn't it? When it was reissued, I think. Yeah.
Recorded most of that up in San Francisco.
Yeah. Well, I now want to bring us kind of more up to date now with what you've been doing more recently, and you've been heavily involved in reissues, remixing things. I mean, one of them is not that long ago in my world, about 10 years ago, was Bad Company's live album, which was wonderful to. If I always feel, Richard, that if this had been released in the 70s, it would have been one of the best live doubles of the 70s. It's interesting that Bad Company didn't release a live album, isn't it? At the time.
What a mystery. What a mystery. Yeah. I couldn't believe that these tracks had been unheard. They were what a fantastic band, and they were great live, weren't they?
I mean, totally. And the quality of these recordings is amazing. And then you move into an area which I think you do an amazing job, which is the live stuff that's in the Black Sabbath Volume 4 Super-Deluxe set. The way that you brought those again, another band that never released a live double in the 70s was Black Sabbath. And here you've made these recordings from 1973, which is like the holy grail for Black Sabbath fans. Yes. Sound the best they've ever sounded. What was it when you had to do this kind of archaeology on them? Did you have to do lots of cleaning up, or I mean, what was it like unearthing those tracks for the first time?
Well, the beauty of, I'm a huge fan of digital. I love my digital audio workstation.
Yeah.
And when people tell me that records that were recorded analog sound better than records recorded today, I don't believe it. And I'll tell you why. It was suggested to me, I think it was Malcolm Toft, who was a studio designer for Trident Studios in London back in the day. Malcolm agreed with me. He's an old timer like myself. Malcolm put it most succinctly when he said those records sounded fantastic despite the fact that they were recorded on analog. Not because they were recorded on analog. The problems with analog, all the tapists, all the prior to there being any automation. I mean, yes, there's a freshness and excitement, and there's a sort of a, that's possibly slightly more dangerous recording in those days, and undoubtedly that I can see the point that would have contributed to the biology of the record, the DNA of the records and stuff. With the Black Sabbath stuff, which is, you're digging into the past. Same with the, which I know you're going to come on to later with the Deep Purple. You're climbing back into the past days of tape, of reel-to-reel analog hiss and distortion.
Yeah.
The unforgiving nature of analog tape. And now I've got it here at home in my modest little home-based mixing and mastering studio, and I've got it up on the screen of my Mac, and I can see it. So if there's a horrible howling screech on a guitar bit of feedback that I want to get rid of, I know I can see exactly where it is because it shows up on the waveform. And if I want to get that forensic with the music. I can actually just find it
and take it out.
mute it just for a brief tenth of a second. But depending on the brief, Phil, that you get, excuse me.
It's okay.
Depending on the brief that you get from the record label or the producer or the management company, they may well ask that you intentionally don't clean it up. That because the danger is with this wonderful world of digital is that you can really get forensic and microscopic detail and correct lots of for want of a better word, errors or little accidents or
it's
what the word is. Audio artifacts.
Audio,
there
yeah,
you go.
Because it's
audio.
I guess it's a fine line because you, for instance, as an example, you were there when Kossoff got his shirt sleeve caught up in his guitar for Heartbreaker. Now, if 20 years into the future somebody else comes along and is told to look at to do yet another definitive version of Heartbreaker, would they be tempted to think, oh, I can get rid of that? That's the thing, isn't it? Because it's that sound is part of the experience that many people have grown up with, and so when you go back and you're told, we'll move on to, made in Japan, people know this so well. And they've heard the other nights all separately that they've got used to the little squeals of feedback and if suddenly it's not there anymore, is it an improvement or is it kind of like what happened? I mean, what? Do you see where I'm going? Where do you draw the line to what is part of the capturing the moment of that magic, and when does it become something else through the eyes of the producer, I guess, or the engineer?
I think particularly with a live album, especially my recent experiences with that Black Sabbath album and the Deep Purple album is the least done, soonest mended. It's and that particularly with live recordings, it is as the name suggests. It's and the brief from Deep Purple's management company, because I did the first couple of mixes I sent them, I managed to correct a couple of. There was a Richie Blackmore was. I mean, they were having problems with the tuning. I don't know whether anybody ever mentioned it. I think the management might have mentioned something to me. And all credit to Richie Blackmore, how he can be playing a guitar solo and tuning his guitar at the same time. I mean, that is a mark of genius.
Yeah.
Excuse me, Phil. So I did, on a couple of initial presentations, I managed to, with the wonderful world of digital, I managed to correct some of the tuning discrepancies, and the management got back to me and were most adamant that I don't do that. It was very early on in the process before I no, with this version they insisted that they want warts and all, absolutely everything, to the point where if there was a bit of feedback or some odd off the mic comment or something, I'd be trying to lift it and enhance it and accentuate it rather than sort of try and hide and duck and dive with all these changes. Because with a live album, here's something for the more technical of your listeners. When you're mixing a live album, where people are on the stage can affect the sound. So, for example, if Ian Gillan decides during the second chorus of Highway Star to go and stand nearer the drummer, you will notice when you solo the lead vocal microphone that there is suddenly one hell of a lot of drums coming down the vocal mic. So it will change the drum sound. So there has to be a certain element of trying to hit a moving target when you're mixing the live album. So in order that the drum sound doesn't change dramatically, you have to make sort of slight adjustments as and when and where you can. So it's a compromise between getting too, I keep using the term forensic, but that's what it is. You've got to resist the temptation to be too detailed, but make sure that you can hear everything. There were a lot of vocal comments that Gillan was making that were quite low and off mic and things. And at one point, the Japanese audience were quite muted at times, and Gillan, I think he pointed that out in between two songs. He said, "It's very quiet in here, isn't it?" He said, and so I made a point of featuring that observation of his because I thought that was incredibly funny.
Yeah, because I think your remixes seem to be the most complete versions of these three separate performances that have ever been released. Because I think when it was only done like 10 odd years ago with Kelly and Shirley, wasn't it? But this is yours seems to be more authentic. It's just everything is there.
That was the brief, Phil. It just mix it all out, the whole thing, all the long gaps, all the the tuning in between the takes.
Yeah.
Ordinarily you'd edit all that out.
Exactly, you would. Yeah.
You'd often with live albums as well, and I know this is naughty, so don't tell anybody. It has to be our secret, Phil. Is often with live albums, you take loops of audience noise and applause and things and spin it like canned
laughter. Yeah.
Not uncommon to do that, but we didn't do any of that. It's what you hear is what happened on those 3 nights in Japan.
Well, finally, Richard, what I'd like to ask, with the way that digital techniques have developed, I know that one of the latest things that's starting to appear everywhere is the idea of demixing albums which don't have the multi-tracks anymore. I know that that's happened on the most recent Hawkwind Hall of the Mountain Grill album. Stephen W. Taylor demixed it to create multi-tracks and then that didn't exist before and then remixed it. And I know there's quite a few things that Stephen Wilson's working on where they're demixing albums to remix them again. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think this means that we can albums where they can't find the multi-tracks now means that we can look at those and revisit them? And is that something that you yourself are involved in?
The closest I've got to that, Phil, is I've got some software that will you can remove the vocal, or isolate the vocal. You know, you can have the if you've just got a stereo, mix to work with. You can separate the vocal from the music. As far as I'm interested to hear that the technology has gotten to the point where presumably then you could separate just the drums, you could separate just the guitar, separate just the bass. So there you go. That's AI's incursion into the world of creativity. Is it a good thing or a bad thing? It depends on, as with all technologies, Phil. There'll be good sides and there'll be downsides. It depends in whose hands and ears it belongs.
Yeah, very true. And on my wish list, Richard, which I know it's probably there's not enough an audience for this, but I'm going to say it anyway because I know some people will say it would be wonderful if this album was remixed or somebody looked down upon wherever they looked down from and said we should do a definitive version of this because it is such a overlooked and beautiful album. And I know there was some. A couple of tracks were extended on the box set, but But it would be lovely if one day somebody says, should we look at this?
Great. Kossoff Tetsu Rabbit. I would, for purely selfish reasons, I'd like to have another go at remixing that, because you're always your own worst critic. As I'm sure you are with some of your work, Phil. You
Yeah,
know, you
yeah,
listen, you
that's
think,
absolutely.
gosh, that cymbal was a bit. That cymbals. Why did I have the overhead mic so loud? Or the snare drum could have been a bit fatter, you know, or could have maybe didn't put a bit too much reverb on that vocal. So, and plus, I don't know who probably Trevor Wyatt, who has his Facebook Island Friends group, might know whether the multi-tracks for those recordings still exist. Or Dave Clayton, if he's still
Yeah,
around and involved. But there must be a bunch of outtakes for a Kossoff, a KKTR Volume 2.
exactly. Super-Deluxe Definitive Edition. Well, thank you. So this book, which has a totally different cover now and is available as an audiobook and an ebook, it's an absolutely wonderful read, everybody. I've only touched on things, but there's so many stories in here. It's a wonderful book. So, Richard, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. Your work has shaped the soundtrack of many people's lives, and it's fantastic to see you continuing to bring this music to new audiences in the present day with such care and respect. And your website is tq1music.com. So thank you so much for your time today, Richard. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to you. I've really enjoyed it. Thanks very much.
Thank you. I'll see you again. Thank you. A huge thank you to my guest, Richard Digby Smith. 1, 2, 3, 4. Literally, the whole story of Richard's career is in this book. It's got a different cover now. I've had this for a while, but it's being reissued. So when you go on Amazon, you'll see a different cover, but it's the same book. I think a few things have been added, a few things corrected, perhaps. But it's a wonderful book. That was an absolutely fantastic interview to do, Richard, because as you all know, one of my favourite bands is Free and anything to do with them. So the fact at the very end, you know, that Richard said he would love to revisit this album and remix it and see what could be done. And I know a lot of people out there, it's their favourite album. You know, did you know that he was involved with Sammy Hagar's live album? And the great story about Since You've Been Loving You. Again, this book is packed full of stories and anecdotal stuff from some of the most classic albums that have been part of our lives for decades. And it was also good to hear about Sparks because I've been doing quite a bit of Sparks on the Now Spinning Magazine website and podcast. And so to hear about how the Gunshots ended up on the album was really, really thrilling as well. Thrilling. And of course, the most importantly for me was hearing things about Paul Kossoff and Free, how they made the music, how they approached the songs, what they were like as people. And again, Richard was roughly the same age, and especially that guitar solo on "Come Together in the Morning." One of my favourite songs, and here it's one of Richard's favourite songs of all time. I think that song and that performance by Paul Rodgers singing it, and then the fact that Kossoff always waited till everything was done and then went in and basically weaved his guitar magic in amongst everything that was there already was just absolutely wonderful. And again, to get the update on the Sabbath and the Purple stuff. So Richard is still working really hard on lots of different projects. The website is tq1music.com. So if you're a band actually looking for someone to help you with master and engineer your stuff, then visit that website. But if you're a music fan, then this book is just absolutely fantastic reflection on what it was like in the late 60s, the 70s, the golden age of island records. And the fact that when Richard said they were sometimes working on 3 or 4 albums at the same time, and being like in your mid 20s, absolutely amazing. But thank you again to Richard Digby Smith, my guest today on the Now Spinning Magazine podcast. An absolutely delightful conversation. Let me know what you think in the comments, whether it's here on YouTube or on Apple or on Spotify. And also visit the website at nowspinning.co.uk and subscribe, become a member or YouTube member or indeed a patron, and you can get access to our private communities on Facebook, on WhatsApp. Come along to our own private pub called the Now Spinning Arms, which meets at twice a month via Zoom, and you also can get discounts on all of our merch, etc. Remember, music is the healer and the doctor. Please take care, all of you. Keep spinning those discs, and I'll talk to you all very, very soon.